Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Swinson. Thank you for taking the time to complete the questionnaire on your financial inventory and the risk tolerance questionnaire. You're both young and eager to get started, and this is great because we have a long time horizon to work with. What I'm going to do here today is to first review your objectives and then show you analytically where you stand regarding your financial status, and then provide a couple of suggestions of how we can meet up with your goal requirements. Now first, let's rehash some of your goals on your questionnaire. Number one, purchase a new truck at a cost of approximately $36,000. Review the coverage for life, health, and property insurance. Review investments and make recommendations. Plan for retirement at the age of 65 for Mrs. Swinson and 62 for Mrs. Swinson. Fund for college education for 2 future kids. And prepare estate planning documents. Now here are some economic assumptions that we were working with. GDP growth 2.5%, S&P return 9%, bond fund return 6%, Treasury money market 1%, inflation 3%, education inflation a little higher 5%, tax rate 25% on ordinary income, 15% on qualified dividends, and long-term capital gains, 5% Georgia income tax. Let me just summarize this. I think these numbers might look okay if we're looking at the long-term equilibrium stock market return. But as we're facing the fiscal cliff, like year 2013 is pretty uncertain. The Congress hasn't come up with any concrete solutions how to reduce the federal debt. So I think that we're going to see some volatility in the stock market return. So certainly projecting a 9% in the near term, I don't know if that's reasonable or feasible. And bond fund return definitely would be under some kind of pressure. If we stop monetizing our debt, interest rate is going to go up. And when interest rate goes up, bond prices goes down. And that will affect bond yield and bond return. So that 6% might not happen too. The good news is money market rate probably will go up. And who knows what happens to inflation? You know, inflation might flare up again. 3% might be a low estimate, it might be a decent estimate. But certainly we know that education inflation has always been and probably will be going up. So 5% is reasonable. Now on ordinary income, with the fiscal cliff coming up, if there is cross-the-board cut on deductions, ordinary income tax might go up to, and particularly with Obamacare, there's another 3% Obamacare tax, and payroll holiday also expiring. So all that would be changing, and it would be pretty interesting to see where the tax rates will be for next year. And I know we are on the New Year's Eve, we should be making decision for the next year, new year, but unfortunately, still a lot of this information are still on hold. So we should be definitely monitoring what the tax rate would be for year 2013, and give you a bit more concrete recommendation when we know what's going to happen from the Congress end. As far as personal assessment on income growth and IBI's growth, 5% on Karl's, Mr. Swinson's salary. IBI, and we're projecting 8% indefinitely. And I want to point out 8% might be a little questionable, because it is like with any entrepreneurial business, we run a lot of risk in getting it going, particularly in the startup situation. So it's a rosy, optimistic scenario, but I think it's definitely worth revisiting in a couple years to make sure that this is actually what we see. 8% might be even on the low side if business really takes off, or maybe on the high side if we run into some kind of obstacles. Mary's wage growth 4% until retirement, and principal residence growth at 3%. And I think those are okay numbers. Same thing. We should definitely revisit. After a couple of years, things do change, and we know that. So next slide, I want to share with you the life cycle model. I'd like to comment that Mr. Swinson, Mrs. Swinson, you are on the accumulation phase. Mr. Swinson, Karl, you're 32, and Mary, Mrs. Swinson, you're 29. You're both married with expecting 2 kids in the future. Right now, Mary's side, Mary's parents, ages 58 and 56, both in relatively good health, and no need for like additional assistance or help in with on the aging parent front. So I mean, they're independent and healthy, so that's great. And then Karl has his sister Heather Paulson, 34, and Mr. Swinson is making $40,000. He's also a 25% owner of IBI. And Mrs. Swinson, Mary, is making $65,000 as the accounting manager at GAL. And then the net worth is $70,255. And most of that really comes from Mr. Swinson's IBI ownership. And here is your balance sheet. Total net worth as reflected is about $74,756, and that's essentially the ownership at IBI. And we look at the pie chart representation. It breaks down your personal assets, investment assets, liability, and net worth. And net worth is about 28% of total assets, and liability is about 65%. And on the numbers percent term, you can see that liability is about, pretty high, and we need to focus on what we can do to cut the liability. Cash and short-term investments about 4%. Personal assets 67, investment assets 29. And then if you look at the benchmark, cash is a little bit on the low side. Investments also low. Personal use assets is 45%. That's considered high. Current liability is high. Long-term liability is low, and net worth is also low. So we're gonna actually work on these numbers. These are just benchmark. And I know you're both starting off, so we have a lot of things that we can do, and a lot of great things we can achieve too. So we're going to cover all that shortly. Here's your income statement, and as you see, there's a negative 2,386. And I just want to kind of point out that I highlighted a couple things. Credit card debt payment is about $10,818. Mortgage on primary residence is $10,478 and $3,895. I think we need to work on those numbers and see what we can do to lower them. Entertainment expense is $15,000 and miscellaneous is $10,000. Again, without actually delving deep into it, I don't know what's going into entertainment and miscellaneous. And what we can do is I like to have an opportunity to do a more detailed budget and see if there is a possibility to free up some of the cash and use that to pay off maybe your credit card debt. Your credit card debt is right now the interest rate is at 12%, which is really pretty high. And as you can see, $10,000 out of like your whole total cash flow of 107, that's about that's close to 10%. 10% goes to credit card debt repayment, and we can fix that, eliminate that. You free up a lot of cash. And similarly, with the mortgage, we can get the interest rate lower, refinance the debt to get the interest rate lower. That's another way we can help you improve your cash flow. Here, okay, same numbers in the pie chart representation. So you can see we like to target the savings not like much higher, like 10 to 18%. Lower your living expense, to under 36, and drastically improve your debt percent. Reduce it down and make it go under less than 28%. So that's what we're going to work on. Here are the numbers. We want to improve your saving, reduce your debt, and we're going to look at insurance coverage. Right now you're only spending 3% of your cash flow on insurance, and we want to make sure that you're well covered there too. And we want to see what we can do to lower the living expense. And certainly you want to erase that negative cash flow that we see at the bottom. Okay, strengths and weaknesses. Like what I said, Mr. Swinson, Mrs. Swinson, you are at accumulation stage. You have 2 incomes and good health. Mary has a great job. It comes with good pay, health insurance, and retirement benefits. And Mrs. Swinson, IBI outlook is great, 8% growth. So we're looking, and you're young, so we're looking at a long accumulation horizon. The weaknesses is that we need to bring back your positive cash flow, start saving for retirement and education, improve your insurance coverage for life, disability, and property insurance, and start planning for estate planning. Here is a three panel approach, which shows you where we should target. Like life insurance right now, it's really pretty low. We want to have 12 to 16 times your salary for both Mrs. Swinson and Mrs. Swinson. Health coverage is fine, excellent as a matter of fact, because there's no lifetime limit cap. And Mrs. Swinson has disability insurance, Mrs. Swinson doesn't, so we want to actually buy something for Mr. Swinson as well. And then home insurance is going to cover that a little bit more detail. And here's some numbers on financial goals too. We want to increase your emergency cash from 1.8 months to at least 3 months. Housing ratio looks fine, and then long-term debt we already covered. We want to lower that. And this is the rest of the stuff. We need to complete some estate planning document and start saving for retirement, as well as saving for education. Now the specifics on life insurance, on risk management. Right now, Mr. Swinson has $10,000 term, and we want to increase that to 12 times the salary. So I recommend buying another policy, $500,000. What we pick is what we're suggesting is annual renewable term, because that provides the lowest cash outflow. It's only $185 annual premium, and since you guys are in relatively good health, we don't see that there's a huge problem in renewing the policy, so we want to conserve cash flow at this point. But I do notice that Karl, Mr. Swinson, beneficiary on that policy that he possessed, beneficiary is himself. I mean, we should definitely change it to the spouse, Mary, although eventually the money will still go to the spouse, but it will go through Karl's estate, which is a pain. It's more long drawn and probably has got some costs involved, so it's much cleaner and easier if we switch to the spouse. Similarly, I noticed that Mrs. Swinson, one of the policies also doesn't have Karl, her husband, as a beneficiary, and I recommend changing that too. And for Mrs. Swinson, I recommend that we should also increase her insurance coverage, buying 2 policies. First from GAL, because it's a very cost-effective way of increasing insurance coverage. Only $100 annual premium, and you get $325,000 coverage. And add another to that, another annual renewable term of $500,000, and that together with the other 2 policies that Mrs. Swinson holds, that would give you 12 times salary coverage. As for health, I don't think there's any need for change, because through Mrs. Swinson's company's coverage, you got excellent healthcare coverage, so that we find there. And Mrs. Swinson holds a disability insurance, so there's no change on that. But we'd like to purchase one for Mr. Swinson, a disability insurance, because disability insurance is probably the hardest to get. And if you are in good health, and if you think there's a need, you probably should get it when you're young. And what we selected is a 60% gross pay 90-day elimination at a premium of $900. And it's a owner's occupation, meaning like if anything happened, if Mr. Swinson no longer can engage in its current occupation, but it move on to another form of occupation, he still gets paid until up till 65 years old. Like if it's not owner's or occupation, modified or non-owner's occupation, if he find another job and it's not related to his own occupation, you're not going to get the same coverage. You probably won't get any coverage. You won't get the 60% gross pay coverage. So it's a least restrictive type. So we recommend that. As for long-term care, since you're both young, I think we should postpone this decision until like you're at least like 50 years old. As for homeowners, auto, and other liability insurance, we recommend homeowners insurance to be updated from age 02 to age 03. That's another $100 in premium. Auto insurance, we want to increase the deductible so we can conserve some cash flow. And at that one point, Mr. Swinson's going ahead to buy a new truck. We need to purchase insurance for that truck too. And on top of that, we'd like to recommend having a liability, a PLUP, purchase another 1 million PLUP coverage, which is like a catch-all umbrella insurance in case anything happened. So that's another premium of $200. This point, I want to go over your investment policy statement. As you indicated in your questionnaire, you're looking for an 8% rate of return. That is a little high because, as according to your questionnaire, you indicate you are only a moderate conservative, and we probably have to increase that if we want higher return. This is really hard to get like a stock market type of return if we have a lot of bonds. So for your reference, I have here two portfolios, the moderate conservative and something a little bit more aggressive. As you can see, with the moderate conservative, over close to 50% is invested in bonds, and then with the moderate growth, it's about 31%. So quite a big difference. And since you have a long time horizon, I would recommend going with something a little bit more aggressive. And here's some summary. We already covered the risk management portion, increasing insurance, lower deductible, buying a PLUP, and so forth. I want to stress that in order to fund for these extra expenses, what we need to look at is really take a very close look at your budgeting and work on the details of the budget, especially on the personal discretionary expenses such as entertainment and miscellaneous expense. From the information that was given to us, we can't really tell if there's anything that what we can do to lower that amount. Certainly we don't want to drastically reduce these two expenses, but if there are opportunities, we certainly want to take a look at that. From the cash flow, from the cuts, first of all, the first thing I'd like to recommend is to eliminate the credit card debts, 12% annual interest rate, and it's really eating up your cash flow. Refinance your principal residence mortgage. That will free up some more cash flow, and use that money to improve your emergency cash. Right now it's at 1.8 months, and we want that to go up to 3 months. At retirement, you know, I know Mrs. Swinson is saving a little bit, so we want Mr. Swinson to start saving as well. And if IBI, the company itself, can offer some tax deferred type of savings where Mr. Swinson can participate, and possibly with some company match, that'd be the most ideal. Otherwise, I would recommend at least like opening an IRA, a Roth IRA, and start saving at the 5%. And then gradually, Mrs. Swinson also increase her contribution from 5% of salary to maybe 10% of the salary. As for taxes, and I noticed that there's $800 out-of-pocket medical expenses, and it'd be nice if we can set up an FSA called Flexi Spending, where you actually use pre-tax dollar to fund for out-of-pocket medical expenses. And with $800 and 25% tax, you probably save close to $200 tax. So that's something that's definitely worth doing. And then Mr. Swinson can probably think about maybe change the company status from a C to an S to eliminate double taxation. Estate planning, will be introducing some competent lawyers to assist you with drafting of wills, health directives, and advanced medical directives. And then at a later point of time, maybe we should also talk about succession planning for IBI, like a buy-sell agreement in case like one of the partners, something happened to them, or when they want to get out, you'd be able to liquidate the your ownership and pass it along. As for, since like we're pretty tight in cash, number one, we want to reverse the cash situation. So some of the priorities probably had to be delayed, like the education funding and the new truck purchase. I suggest holding off for a little bit until cash flow improves, or maybe, you know, purchase a less expensive vehicle. But actually, we're going to have a pretty defined step-by-step how we're going to approach each of these objectives. This actually, we talked about the investment, like, you know, maybe we had to increase the risk tolerance, you know, to optimize the target return. And we recommend monitor and rebalance as necessary, and also delaying the education funding until maybe when the first child is born, and consider using an Education 529, particularly in Georgia, where the state actually offers a $2,000 state income tax deduction on contributions. Now here's the timeline. Before I move to that, I actually want to talk about IBI again. I just want to stress it again. We've covered that before. The unique business risk of IBI, something that cannot be diversified away. Demand, customers' demand, raw material pricing, you know, raw materials price can go up, and the pricing, would you able to get the price that you want? It's always a challenge to manage that. And then we also talked about the need for succession planning. And the other thing is, like, Mr. Swinson was thinking of liquidating his ownership in IBI to fund for his retirement, and assuming 8% growth indefinitely. So we need to question whether that 8% is going to hold up. And then let's say it does, and when you want to sell it, there's also, would you be able to get what you want from it, because it's a liquid asset. And finally, it's at a growth stage, so the company has accumulated a lot of debt. So there's a financial risk from expansion. All right, so more, I want to substantiate how the step-by-step, what we're going to do to implement that, to help you achieve your financial objectives. Now first, I think first and foremost, the most important thing is I see is to pay off the high interest credit card debt, 12%. Refinance the mortgage to free up the cash. Right now, the interest rate for your mortgages are 7.5 and 9%, and we can lower it to 5.25. So that's going to help. Improve your life insurance coverage. We talk about that. Decrease discretionary spending one time. Entertainment by 50. Miscellaneous expense by 30. So I know it's quite a lot, but maybe you can just do it for at least like for 1 year to pay off. Use the money to pay off your credit card debt, and get the finance in better shape, and then we can increase the spending in those two areas again. So as for year 2, a goal would be to build up your emergency fund from 1.8 months to 3 months. Increase retirement funding. Mr. Swinson will start funding for a Roth at 5% of salary, and Mrs. Swinson will increase 401k funding to 5% of salary, and start establishing some estate planning documents. That shouldn't be too expensive. And if you do want to purchase a truck now, then I would have to suggest that you have to decrease your entertainment expense and miscellaneous expense in order to keep the debt level low and not to pay way too much interest to burden yourself. And that again, points back to we should look at your line by line budget on entertainment and miscellaneous, see if there's any feasible area that we can cut without a lot of pain. And after buying the truck, we're going to take a 5-year mortgage on the truck. So after 5 years, the truck will be paid off, year 6, by the end of year 6. And then after the emergency fund has been replenished, we would have extra money to start funding for more retirement savings. So at that point, from year 3 to year 6, both Mr. and Mrs. Swinson, you can increase your retirement funding to 10%. But if we were to continue paying for the truck, the entertainment expense still has to go down by about 15%, miscellaneous expense by 20%. So those are not very drastic numbers, so maybe there's a way we can get that done. And then by year 7, the truck will be completely paid off. We can start funding for the education expense of the 2 kids. Now we are assuming right now everything stays as projected. There's no major increase or decrease in Mr. and Mrs. Swinson's salary, or like anything happen to Mrs. Swinson's family. You need to have extra cash flow to assist with her parents' retirement. On the number side, I'm going to show you how it would look if we implement these plans. If we pay off the credit card loan, that frees up like really drastically $11,112. And it's a one-time payoff of $17,000. I think it's totally worth it. And the mortgage, one time you have some financing costs, but ongoing you're saving $4,000 a year. And we have some additional expenses on the insurance, but we managed to cover some part of it by increasing the deductible from the auto insurance. But if we were able to at least make that one-time pain of cutting entertainment and miscellaneous expense, we would have a positive cash flow for year 1, and I think that's very positive. Year 2, as we move on according to our suggested plan, start increasing our emergency fund. After we pay off the credit card debt, take that extra money to pay off the increase the emergency fund, and start funding for a little bit more retirement savings, and also do our legacy planning, $1,000. And if you want to go ahead and purchase a truck, then we have to continue making some sacrifice on the entertainment expense in year 2. Year 3, the entertainment expense doesn't have to lower by that much. It's only year 2. So, it's a difference of 1 year, but then you push it out 1 more year. So it's really, your decision whether you want it to be year 2 or year 3. In any case, according to what we estimate, what we will be able to put you back to positive cash flow. Year 2 cash flow would be plus $2,000, and year 3 through year 6 is also a positive, like close to $3,000. So that's really nice. And after year 6, when the truck has been paid off, then we start paying for funding for education, and then bump up the retirement saving, and then we still have positive cash flow. So that's really, really nice. Now I want to show you how it would look, 7 years later, 6 years later, after we implemented all the plans. Your net worth went up drastically. It was 74, now it's going up to 195,000. So that's really nice. And then we know our cash balance went up. Our liabilities went down. So on the percentage pie chart, you can see net worth is 58%. It was like 34 or something percent before. So in long-term liabilities also went down quite a lot. That's really nice. And here's the income statement. We have positive cash flow at the bottom, 2779. Here is a look using pie charts. As you can see, savings 18%, recommended is 10 to 18. Living expense still a little bit high, Recommended to be under 36 with 37. It's not pretty good already. Debt payment, we really cut debt by a lot. It's only 10% now. It means versus before it was like 25. So I think we're doing very, very well. And here are the amortization table for retirement. I only factored $5,000 Social Security contribution for Mr. Swinson. I didn't even factor in the sale of IBI. So, like, you know, it's something really good position to be in, let's say, to know that you'd be able to pay for everything without even having to sell your IBI ownership. And for Mrs. Swinson, we underfunded a little bit, but that doesn't include the 70% pre-retirement income from Gal's pension. So if you factor that, you're also doing extremely well. You'd be more than adequately funded. And here's a summary. Oh, and education funding. Assuming that the kid's born on year 7 or maybe later, and college costs at $18,500 per year, you'd be well funded too. Now, if the kids do come a little earlier than year 7, that would mean that you have to put a little bit more money in. I didn't really factor in like the 100% salary increase. Maybe, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Swinson both doing better financially, or maybe there's an opportunity to cut some more expenses. Certainly, you know, there are opportunities to increase that funding in that area. And here's finally like a goal accomplishment summary. I think we've accomplished everything. We were able to increase our emergency funding year 1, and we met our saving for retirement. We purchased our truck. It's either year 2 or maybe year 3, depending on whether we want to cut further in discretionary spending. And then year 7, we start funding for education. And we will do our legacy documents in year 2. So all those goals and objectives are accomplished. Further consideration, later point in time, you know, maybe we need to go back to the drawing board and revisit a couple other issues that when your life situation changes. Maybe you want to start funding for long-term care, and maybe their needs from aging parents, we need to think about caring for them as well. And maybe establish a buy-sell agreement for IBI and other expenses such as raising the kids, nanny, and other discretionary expense to raise the kids. And that's it. Thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you more.